Hey everybody, it's really nice to see you again. This is our first video in 2022. I want to thank you, as always, for taking a few minutes out of your day as we sit down and consider the source. I'm Michael Wagner, one of the co-founders here at Omnia Family Wealth. I am joined once again by Alon Ozer, our Chief Investment Officer. Hey Alon.
Hey Michael.
Nice to see you.
You too.
So you just wrote an amazing memo on risk. And we've done a series of these. This is the latest in a series.
Yeah.
We're really pulling out a little bit. And I think talking about risk in a different way than we have in the past. We're usually talking about portfolio risk. And what you've been paying more attention to, at least in this memo lately, is sort of the societal level of risk and our overall relationship with it. So I'll just start it off saying, how has our relationship with risk and our perception of risk changed over these past, let's say, couple of years?
Right. So this is the final. Well, I can't say the final. There's not a final, but it's the last memo on a series of memos about different types of risks, and of course, risks are being measured and looked at differently with different investors. In our case, we wrote mostly about the risks that we see in the economy, the risks to portfolios, the risks to investors. But something has changed since, I wouldn't say change, it might have been a trend that just accelerated after 2020. But we saw a couple of things that were very interesting and kind of pointed out to a bigger phenomenon that's happening. And what we saw is that the risk-taking environment has changed, not only in financial assets in the markets, but also in society. And it has, you can interpret it in different ways. For us, the way that we look at risks and the economy and everything that's related to that in cycles. And one of the things that we were thinking is, okay, does this mean that we are in a certain point in a cycle? And not necessarily in an economic cycle, but maybe a socioeconomical cycle.
Fascinating. So you mentioned we look at a lot of different things and we're seeing data points, right? What are some of the data points that we're seeing that lead us to this opinion that risk-taking is at an elevated level versus the past? What data are you seeing?
Right. So I think that in general, most people felt that there's a change in the air after the recent elections. There was a big division, and the mood was just not. It wasn't great. It wasn't a great feeling. Then we had the recovery from COVID, and we started seeing the change that I mentioned in risk-taking, but not necessarily in financial markets. And the data points that we're looking at is, for example, the numbers of homicides in the U.S. that hit record level, the number of fatal car accidents happening in the U.S. also hit record levels. Something that's a little bit, I never read about it, but it was interesting to see that. It was the first time I saw it. Then the number of weapons being smuggled at airport checkpoints is at record level. And loaded weapons, trying to get them on an airplane. Crime wave. There's an actual crime wave in the U.S. that you read about a little bit here, a little bit there, but when you put all the data points together, you see it's serious. So all these different things, and one of the things that we try to do is we try to because investing is obviously emotional, right? You take risk, you get paid for taking risks. And we think there is a connection between the two, and that's what we are trying to analyze and understand the implications.
It's very interesting. So we're really looking at these different data points within society, right? So you mentioned homicides, TSA confiscation of weapons, and these are all starting to paint a picture that collectively we're more comfortable with taking risks perhaps than we were 5 or 10 years ago. You made a comment sort of in the beginning that I want to come back to, the idea that this may be cyclical, right? Have we seen something like this before? And if it is indeed cyclical, how did that end? Or
That's a good question. It's a tough question to answer because we do think it's cyclical. There is a certain cycle that we're following that is happens every 50 years. So that's the cycle. But the point is that 50 years ago, we could measure what we're measuring today. The number of car accidents, the number, how many cars there were, and so it's a different type of data points that we're looking at. But in general, yes, there are socioeconomic cycles in the U.S. If you look back towards the establishment in 1776, we had 5 of them. The most 2 recent ones were started basically in the 30s, in 1932, when I think it was Roosevelt who replaced Hoover as president. And then the second one was when I think Reagan replaced Carter. So during President Hoover's presidency, it ended at a point where the economy was distressed. Obviously, there was the Big Depression. If you remember the phrase Hooverville, where people basically lived on the streets, things like that. So we know what was the situation of a society. Basically, there was a lot of stress. There was a lot of problems. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot, and people express it in different ways. Sure. And that's why we think people express themselves right now with there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of aggravation, there's a lot of, so that's one of the things that we think is related to that cycle. And then the second cycle basically started in 1980, I think, with Carter. Basically what happened is that you had the inflationary environment, and then if reminds us something of today, it was the inflation, and then the push to raise taxes, and they did raise taxes, and that actually hurt the middle class and higher class. So all these things that kind of remind us of today, and at every end of cycle, what we see is a dislocation politically and economically. Sure. And unfortunately, it's not something that we can say that we don't see right now. We do see that. So one of those negative records that we see is the inequality, the wealth gap, where 1% of the population controls 38 or 39% of the overall wealth, and it creates a lot of tensions. It relates to crime rates. So if you look at the cities in the U.S. with the highest gap between wealthy and the poor, you see there is a very high, very close correlation to crime rates. So there is a relationship. We think it is a long-term cycle, and we obviously don't know when it's going to end or how. But it's I'm not envying the next president. 2024 is going to be very tough.
I don't think any of us are. So whenever we think about cycles, we think about extremes, right? And we're talking about perhaps an extreme comfort with risk that may be followed up by an extreme aversion to risk. And there's always some catalyst, right, that gets us from one to the other. And I think what we're saying is we don't know what that catalyst will be. We think the conditions are ripe for ultimately one day going back to a more risk-averse environment. But we've got to prepare ourselves for whatever may come that suddenly causes us all to reconsider our relationship with risk, right?
Right, absolutely.
So what can families and individuals do to prepare for maybe a rapid, I have to use a financial term, but a repricing of risk, right? Where we all suddenly reconsider our relationship with it. What could that mean for our personal lives, but also our financial lives and the wealth that we've worked so hard to accumulate and protect? Right.
So I'll start from the personal level, because it's not something that we're looking to predict, and it's not something that we. But personal safety. So in extreme situations, if you look at other countries historically, it led to kind of civil war, but that's not what we're talking about. Right. This is not. I hope we're not talking about things like that. What it does mean that when you look at the end of each cycle, there was, again, like I said, there was there was a dislocation in the economy, socially, and the implications are you're going to see changes in terms of there's going to be a lot of political pressure. There's going to be a lot of geopolitical pressure. It leads to a lot of geopolitical conflicts. It leads to the political pressure leads to the government trying to either raise taxes in order to control some of the bring home some of the assets, because we know what we're doing right now. Basically, we're issuing bonds and buying them ourselves to fund these different programs. So you have to consider the cost of goods. You have to look at inflation. You have to look at the levels of assets that you're purchasing right now. If there is, and just a quick and very small example, when there was a kind of a repricing of assets in technology companies, we saw what happened. The NASDAQ maybe is down 10%, but a lot of companies are down 50, 60%. So this is a very quick change that if you weren't ready for and you went with the hype, you got hurt. The other thing is that is very important for high net worth individuals is taxes. What's going to happen in taxes? How do you look at it? How do you interpret the programs that are being proposed, right? Things like that are things that are very, very important to understand. It's going to affect your business. It's going to affect the different laws that might pass because of that, either to protect businesses, exporters, importers. Different things that could happen that you have to look at.
It's very interesting. So what I've heard is there's been an increased appetite and comfort with risk taking.
Yeah.
It is cyclical. There's a lot of data that back this up as well.
Yeah.
We do know that cycles ultimately reverse. So in order for families and people to really prepare for it, right, it's being forward-looking. We talked about inflation, thinking about how that could impact your family, your business, and also your portfolio, thinking about the roles that your different investments are playing in various economic regimes, inflation being a major one of concern right now, and continuing to stay abreast of recent developments in our beautiful country and everything that's going on legislatively, and knowing what may be coming down the tax pike, staying informed, and as always, relying on your team of advisors. So, Alon, it's always a fascinating conversation, and I love having these chats with you and learning what we can about what's going on. Is there anything we missed? Anything you want to make sure we really drive home? Should we sign off?
No, I don't think so. It's just an overview of the types of things that we see. Let's see risks not only in financial markets, but also in society. At some point, it's going to change, and we just want to be prepared for it. We don't know when it's going to happen, if it's going to. We're just saying, do the work, be able to lower the risks, or at least know the risks, understand the risks that you're facing, and
so keep an eye out.
That's what you can do.
Yeah. Well, Alon, thank you again. There's a wonderful memo we have up on the website. If you want a little more info on it, you can always reach out to us directly. Give us a call, shoot me an email. We'd love to chat. As always, I want to thank you for your time. And please don't forget, go ahead and subscribe and hit the like button. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great day. Be well.